Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste to everyone and welcome to the 8th session of Atmabodha. Today we are going to study some very important ideas that have to do with epistemology actually. What Vedanta says about how we know, Vedantic epistemology you can say. So this is a very important topic, exactly what is knowledge and how do we know? So there are certain very interesting ideas in Vedanta. We know the common theory of perception, of knowledge, which science offers us. That itself is so interesting. See how now, suppose I see a tree. How do I know it is a tree? It all begins with the object radiating light towards me. It is throwing out some amount of light. The light that reflects off that object enters my eye, creates an image, an inverted image on my retina, goes to my brain. There, the visual cortex that gets sensitized and that records the image as it were. And then the brain compares this with the prior knowledge of a tree which I have, with my memory as it were. And this prior knowledge makes me understand that this is a tree. And suppose it's something I'm seeing for the first time, then just the image and the name gets recorded in my brain. So this is how normally perception takes place. But what Vedanta adds to this, in addition to this process is, see, unless you are mindful, you are not going to perceive something even if it's in front of you, isn't it? If my mind is elsewhere, will I be able to perceive what is in front of me? This happens in classrooms, isn't it? Many times. The students are watching, they are looking at the teacher, but they are not seeing. They are not even hearing because the mind is elsewhere. So unless you are mindful, unless the mind is in place, you are not going to perceive. So mind is a very important factor in perception. And unless you are a conscious entity, the perception will not take place at all because ultimately it takes place in your consciousness. So Vedanta tells us that perception is nothing but the illumination of a vritti in your mind, a vritti that is created in your mind about the object. The illumination of that vritti by consciousness is what is called perception. This is the definition of perception in Vedanta. So now we will understand a few more concepts here. What do they mean by a vritti in your mind? See, whenever you observe an object, let's say you're seeing a tree, a modification of that tree, a kind of modification occurs in your mind with regard to that object of perception. Your mind modifies when it gets that information, that data from the external. It modifies. It, as it were, brings in that information and modifies accordingly. This is called a vritti technically. In the Yoga Sutras, this is a very important concept, the concept of vritti. Every act of perception modifies the mind. And because this modification is lit up by consciousness standing behind the mind, you come to know of the object. You recognize the object. This is how knowledge arises in us. So the creation of this vritti comes from the dhatu vrit, which basically means a whirl, a kind of whirl of thought. So this vritti, creation of vritti, is primary to knowledge about the object. If the vritti is not created, as I told you, if your mind is not in place, if your mind is elsewhere, the vritti will not be created. As a result, even though you may be looking at the object, you won't get knowledge of the object. So the creation of vritti in the mind is you can say, very important to getting knowledge of an object. That is why there's a yogic text called Panchashikha. There, this is described as Ekameva darshanam khyatireva darshanam, which means there is only one way of knowing, and that is through khyati. Khyati means vritti jnana is called khyati, the knowledge born of vrittis or modifications of the mind. That is called khyati, and that is the only way of perception, only way of perceiving an object. The creation of a modification in your mind. See, this vital point, that's why we always try to combine objective and subjective sciences. Only this subjective science of Yoga Vedanta will give you this very vital point that yes, indeed, unless you are mindful, there is not going to be any real perception. And you are a conscious agent, there is not going to be perception. Consciousness and mind contribute substantially to your perception of anything, to the generation of knowledge. So this is how the process of perception is explained in Vedanta. The illumination of the vritti in your mind caused by the object is knowledge, generates the knowledge about the object. Now, Vivekananda used to demonstrate all this through a very nice story, which many of you will be knowing. It's there in Swamiji's works. How exactly the mind affects perception and how the content of your mind is going to decide what you're going to see. We may not have paid attention to this point, but it's a very vital point. Please see this. So, Vivekananda's story is, it's quite amusing. The story goes like this, and I will add something to the story also. The story is that there is a park, and in the park there's a huge tree. Now, it so happened that one day the tree was brought down for some reason, and only the stump remained. Now, the people who would visit that park, they were used to seeing this tree in that particular space. But suddenly now they are seeing only the stump, and then when it turned dusk, when the light was minimal, the stump appeared all the more eerie and strange, because they were used to only seeing the whole place as dark and filled with trees. So now a whole lot of children would come there in the evening to play in this park. So as soon as they saw the stump, and in the dark, now it's twilight hour, there's very little light, so at once they thought, oh, this must be a ghost. It used to be all dark, but now there's something there. It must be a ghost. And they ran away because there was the dominant emotion of fear in their minds. That's why they saw a ghost in the stump. And then a thief came there. He had just robbed somebody and he was trying to escape from the policeman. So he comes there and he sees in the distance there's something dark like this. Oh, maybe the policeman is coming from that side. So he runs in the opposite side. He sees the stump as a policeman, because there is the fear of being caught in his mind. So he doesn't stop to scrutinize what is there. Just the knowledge is based on that emotion, on fear. And he goes away in the opposite direction. Then the policeman comes there and he's all out trying to catch the thief. So when he sees something dark there, he feels that's the thief. So that's his interpretation, because he's looking for the thief. You are going to find what you're looking for. You're going to see what you're looking for. And then there's a lover who comes there, who was waiting for his beloved. And he thinks the girl is sitting there. So you see that what emotion is dominant in their minds. They are seeing only that. A friend is waiting for his friend. He comes there and thinks that's the friend waiting there. He goes close and sees it's not that and goes back. So you see, it's only a stump of a tree, but it appears to be so many things to so many minds. So the content of our mind is going to determine what we are going to perceive. Now, this is not so simple a point. This is what is happening with many of us. Please see this. Many times there are so many things in our mind, on our mind, as it were, that you are seeing it through that lens. you are interpreting this entire world through the instrumentation of your mind. And that mind is conditioned with so many things, so many types of emotions, thoughts, biases and prejudices, so many types of motivations, attitudes, desires. Naturally, our interpretation of this universe is quite different. In every mind, it is different. And you are going to see what you want to see. You are going to perceive what your instrumentation will allow you to perceive. In a sense, you will see what your mind will reflect. The content of your mind, you will be seeing back. As these people saw the dominant emotion in their minds translated into the actual object of perception. And suppose now somebody comes into the park who has nothing on his mind. This is something we can add to this story. Suppose somebody comes there just to get some fresh air with an empty mind, nothing on his head. And what is he going to see? He is going to see the stump of the tree. Because there's no emotion in his mind, no fear, no worry. He is not expecting anybody. He's not expecting to see anybody. He's not anticipating something. So he will just go close to the stump and see the stump of the tree. That is all. So if you want to see reality as it is, you cannot afford to generate vrittis. This is the point which we have to catch here. Vritti Gnan, this khyati, is all right for objective knowledge. When you want knowledge of an object. But if you want knowledge of the subject, you want to see reality as it is, then you must empty your mind. If there is nothing in the head, that's the best way to perceive. You know, most of these meditation techniques, whether yoga, Vedant, all of these, they are asking you, basically leading you to the state of emptying mind, no mind, what is called. Maybe through a mindfulness technique. But to the final effect should be an empty mind. Because that will perceive best reality as it is. Because reality is not created or generated. It is always there. I did not perceive it for so long because I was busy with my mind. So reality is not a construct. Reality is ever unchanging, ever present. I must only bring my mind into the state of perfect perception, complete perception, by emptying it of unnecessary content. And I will see the truth as it is. So this is what this very profound story actually illustrates. This is what it is trying to teach us. Understanding this, we will just go a bit into what Shankaracharya is telling us in the next verse. But before I enter the verse, let me just point out to one more thing. Usually when we talk of knowledge, knowing, what we mean is only this much. We are trying to explain one objective process through a more fundamental objective process, in terms of a more fundamental objective process. Now, this holds good. This is good enough for objects, for something in front of you, which you are perceiving through your five senses. But this is no good a process to perceive the subject, obviously. So we use techniques like these: emptying mind, no mind, intuitions, pure awareness, intuiting pure awareness. These are all yogic Vedantic techniques used to dive into self-knowledge, Atmabodha. We must understand the whole mechanism of perception, and then we will be naturally led to this. And we will understand the importance of vritti and the importance of the vritti-less state. Don't think the state without vrittis is, well, just nothing is there. You are very much there. The fully conscious state without thoughts. That is the vritti-less state that they are speaking of in no mind. So if that is generated, it takes you naturally to the knowledge of the subject. Because the subject ever is, the confusion in your mind was preventing you from seeing, peering into the self. Peering into the self. Once this is cleared, then You will naturally adopt a technique which will remove unnecessary vrittis from your mind. And the only vrittis you will encourage are vrittis based on true knowledge and on devotion to God. So this is the path which is clearly, you can see Atmabodha. This text is clearly showing you the path we should take to arrive at this knowledge. They don't just speak of the end, they also give you the means, the method to go towards that end. So let us go into verse number 24, where Shankaracharya will be talking of this very thing which we are discussing. Verse number 24, Atmanaha Sachidamshascha Buddhe Vrittiriti Dvayam Sanyojya Cha Abhivekena Janamiti Pravartate. Such a notion as I know is produced by the union due to non-discrimination of a modification of the mind with two aspects of the Atman, namely existence and consciousness. You see, how do you know? By the union of a modification of the mind, a vritti, with the existential reality of existence and consciousness shining behind the mind. A conjunction between these two, a combination of these two generates knowledge for you. So in all spiritual traditions, how to get knowledge of an object, how to get knowledge of the Supreme Person as an object, and how to get knowledge of what is called Nirgun Brahman, the Supreme Reality as it is. All of these are described. How do you get knowledge of Sagun Brahman? Maybe you want to see God, you want to experience God as a person, as a mother, as somebody whom you adore, as a friend. There are in so many bhavas, in so many ways you can approach God. So if you want to see Him like that, there is a method, there is a way to perceive Him like that. You create super fine vrittis, generate high level awareness and very devotional, very high level vrittis, and you will be able to grasp the nature of God. You will be able to perceive God. Again, it's all to do with spiritual practice, purification of mind, all this. And if you want to see reality as it is, Nirgun Brahman, then you just empty your mind, remove all vrittis in a state of complete awareness. That itself will take you to the very source of your perceptive process, which is the Atman, which is Brahman. It will take you to pure consciousness. There is this very beautiful Zen story based on this. Let me just give you that story here. It's very illustrative. There was a professor who wanted to learn Zen. And so he comes to a Zen master and he tells him that I want to learn Zen from you. And then the master sees he's a professor with a whole lot of knowledge and ideas and mind, a full mind, as it were, stuffed with so much information and data. So then the Zen master, he says, okay, let's have a cup of tea. And over the cup of tea, we will discuss Zen. And then he brings 2 cups and starts pouring out tea. Now he pours the tea in such a way, the cup starts overflowing. And the tea overflows into the saucer, and then it overflows from the saucer onto the table, and the tablecloth gets wet with tea. And then the professor can take it no more. He says, what are you doing? Please stop. The tea is overflowing. And then the Zen master keeps the teapot down and says, this is exactly the state of your mind. It is overflowing with ideas, with thoughts, with information, with so much data. How can I pour tea into it? How will you understand Zen? It is already full, the mind. And our minds are not just full of information and this kind of data. They are full of all sorts of emotions and desires and so much memory. The memory bank is so huge. See, even if you don't actually give in to perception, your memory will generate whole movies for you, the whole lifetime. So this is the content of our mind. Your whatever you're calling your thoughts is nothing but a replay of your memories many a time. So the movie is going on and on and on. The mind is simply full of content. How will we know Zen? How will we know Vedanta? How will we know what they are meaning by pure awareness, no mind? So we require a practice, a technique to empty mind first. This is what this story is telling us. The Zen master says, first you empty your mind. Empty the teacup, then I can pour tea into it. So empty your mind of unnecessary fluctuations of thought. Empty your mind of its deep inner conditioning of all sorts of emotions. See, a spiritual aspirant, practically, let me tell you, will only encourage vrittis of devotion. Because that is about the reality, that is about God. Only that has place in his mind. This text is teaching us what kind of a mind we need to manufacture to come to this level of knowledge. A mind which is only sensitive to devotion, a mind which has very pure vrittis, thought forms. Only these are really valuable. The rest is, well, you know, it's a whole lot of confusion. It's a whole lot of all kinds of feelings and thoughts mixed up, a huge amount of conditioning. That's why we feel this sense of restlessness, peacelessness. So first is to bring our mind into these very stable inner states, sattvic states, where devotion dominates above everything and Vedanta dominates. Vrittis are only about reality. So this comes by practice. That is why I told you the practice and the study should go hand in hand. We are studying something so that the practice becomes a living thing in our lives. And once the mind is trained like that, you see, the study itself will be sufficient. Just Shravan can be sufficient for a very developed, very, very sensitive mind. But until then, you have to keep practicing again and again. So this is what this verse 24 is telling us. In the next verse, 25th verse, he is going to tell us the unchanging character of the Atman and how to differentiate it from the mind, from the buddhi. Please see the verse. Atmano vikriya nasti, buddher bodho na jatviti, jiva sarvamalam jnatva jnata drashteti muhyati. Atman never undergoes change and the buddhi is never endowed with consciousness. But man believes Atman to be identical with the buddhi and falls under such delusions as that he is the seer and the knower. See, this is what is happening. We are identified with the buddhi. How many of us can say, I am apart from my intellect? Think and see. Practically, you must, as I told you, apply Vedanta to yourself. It's an entirely first-person perspective. In my system, how am I identified? Usually we think we are embodied minds. And yes, the buddhi, of course. I am my intellect. It is very difficult to differentiate awareness from buddhi. It requires strong spiritual practice because the two appear to be the same. That's why you have a sense of identity with your buddhi, with your intellect, the higher intellect. And we presume that to be I, me. That's my identity. That's how we think. So here he is making this clear statement that the buddhi is never endowed with consciousness. Only the self has consciousness. The buddhi, the intellectual instrument, borrows consciousness and appears to be luminous. Luminous with the light of awareness. It's all functioning on borrowed light. See, if you look at the moon at night, it appears so beautiful, shining in the dark sky. It appears luminous. It's all borrowed light. Moonlight is sunlight reflected off the moon. But it doesn't seem to be so to our eyes. So also in our own equipment, the buddhi, intellect, is functioning on borrowed awareness. What is the proof for this? Your buddhi can shut down. It can be honed. It can be made more intelligent. It can be made dull. It can be conscious or unconscious. It is changing. That means consciousness is not a property of the buddhi. It is an acquired property. Consciousness is intrinsic only to the Atman and borrowed by the rest of your equipment. That is why pure existence and consciousness are said to belong only to the self and not to anything else. So this is what, this is the constant refrain in this book. Atman, to be identical to buddhi, is a delusion, he says. And due to this delusion, the person starts considering himself to be the knower, karta, bhokta, doer, knower, the experiencer of the fruits of his actions. All these titles and epithets we draw upon ourselves because the Atman is identified with the buddhi, the mind, and the body. This body-mind intellect complex, due to the Atman's identification with it, it appears to be conscious by itself and appears to be the doer of action, the experiencer of experiences. Isn't this how we perceive ourselves? See, check and see. Your sense of yourself, your identity, this is how it works. So, what is exactly happening? He is giving us the inside view, the insider's view. The Atman gets reflected in the mind primarily and generates your sense of mental awareness. That mental awareness is also reflected in the buddhi, the intellect situated in your mind. And so the buddhi appears luminous. And then it again reflects that light on the body. So the body also appears to be me and functioning by itself. And that is how we naturally identify with the body-mind intellect complex. So this is the insider's view. From the external front, you are only this. You are your personality. Initially, we discussed what personality means. So Vedanta is going to the very crux of your individuality. It is actually giving you the view which you get from the realized state, the state of complete realization. Then you understand how this entire complex, BMI complex, we say, body, mind, intellect complex, is external to you. It's something that you're wearing and functioning as a living entity in this world. So this, I remember one story which Sri Ramakrishna used to say. It comes in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. He uses the story of a sergeant with a lamp. You know, even in today's India, you will find many times these night guards who have a lantern in one hand, because there are villages where there are no street lights. So they have a lantern in one hand and a stick in the other. And they make a lot of noise with that stick as they go on their night rounds, so that everybody should fear that the police is on patrol, as it were. And the lantern is in their hands. Now, the lantern is always, he's on the lookout on the outside to see if anybody is moving about anywhere. But if you want to see the face of the person who's holding the lantern, what will you do? You will ask him to turn the light towards himself, isn't it? So also, if you want to know the subject, the supreme subject, the self, you must learn to turn the light of your awareness inward and not simply invest it in the buddhi, mind and body. This is the way to self-realization, Atmabodha. So this idea is coming up again and again in these verses. Now we will go to the 26th verse. Yes. Rajju sarpavad atmanam jivam jnatva bhayam vahet naham jiva paramatmeti jnatas chen nirbhayo bhavet. The soul, regarding itself as a jiva, is overcome by fear, just like the man who regards a rope as a snake. The soul regains fearlessness by realizing that it is not a jiva, but the Supreme Soul. So a wonderful analysis of individuality and fear is there in this verse. So who is the jiva? It's again a technical term used repeatedly in Vedanta. The jiva is that entity which has reflected awareness identified with a body-mind-intellect complex. Isn't it? Just now we discussed. When reflected awareness is in Vedanta called Chidabhas. This Chidabhas makes you identify yourself with the body-mind-intellect complex. This is what is called the Pramata. When the Chidabhas styles itself as I, then you become the Pramata. It is reflected awareness in your mind. And through that reflected awareness, you naturally assert or assume you are this body-mind complex, which is all functioning on borrowed light, the borrowed light of awareness. So this is called the jiva, the embodied soul, endowed with a body-mind-intellect complex. Now, as long as the jiva functions like this, completely out of touch with the reality that it is actually, it will be endowed with fear. This is what the verse says. Just like how if you perceive the rope as a snake, won't it generate fear? So how do you remove that fear then? Do you go about killing the snake? Suppose you perceive a rope as a snake and get a lot of fear, get very fearful. How are you going to remove that fear? Will you kill the snake? Or will you call the neighbors to remove the snake? What will you do? Bring a stick? No. You will only see that it is not. You try to see what it actually is. It is not a snake at all. It's a rope. In dim light, you saw it as a snake. So you will throw sufficient light on the matter. Isn't it? So also now, if I have to know who I truly am, I'm not this jiva, this embodied entity that appears to be an individual. I am the self insinuating as the jiva. If I have to be able to catch this, then I must throw more light on this, more light of awareness. And you will see you are indeed the Atman, expressing yourself through a body-mind complex. That is all. So without this knowledge, one is stricken with fear. This is what he's saying. Look at your own life and see how many types of fears. There are psychological fears, there are existential fears. I don't have to name them. About everything can throw us into a state of fear, panic, or a state of contraction, misery, for the simple reason the individual that we think ourselves to be is a very fragile entity. And that is why the constant sense of fear. And existential fears can be very intense. Look at the fear of death, the fear of not knowing what is beyond this life. So these type of fears, the only solution you can find to these fears is you dive into the heart of reality and see things as they are. That is the only way to overcome these fears. To understand life, you must understand death. To understand the value of life, you must know something about death. So this fear of death can only be removed if you dive into the undying one. That knowledge which is everlasting, the knowledge of that, the Atman. Until then, the jiva is stricken with various degrees of fear. In fact, this is what paralyzes all our efforts. In spiritual life, you can see clearly the different levels and degrees of fears which we can have unless we get authentic first person spiritual knowledge. These fears translate themselves into various things in our lives. Have you seen this? They can translate themselves into worries and anxieties, into blaming others, into spoiled relationships, into all sorts of agonizing attitudes. For the simple reason, we have not explored and gone into the causal understanding of our fears. So the causal understanding is this: discover who you truly are, and you will be able to give things the place they deserve in your life. Everything a lot, depends on thinking. Let me here, for some time briefly, dwell upon some of the laws of thought which all of us should know. Since we are students of Vedanta, we should know how powerful our mental mechanism is, our mind is, and what we think that we are going to become. Just like how you see here, he just now told us, if you assume the rope to be the snake, then fear is generated. What you are thinking, that is generating your fear, not reality itself. So also, exactly what we think about ourselves is going to become our very being, our perception of ourselves. See, these are some of the laws of thought. What you think, that you will be. You will become that. What you repeatedly think, you are going to become that. So please take care of your thinking. What you imagine, you will create. And what you feel, you will experience. So feeling, imagination, and thinking should be guided, under control, positive. Because what you think, you will be that. What you imagine, you will create that. And what you feel, you will experience that. Repeatedly thinking of something will make it part of your being, part of your life. It will become reality for you. It may be absolutely unreal, but your thought makes it real. So please understand, these are the laws of thought which all of us should know. That is why the importance of positive thinking, proper, rightly guided thinking, exposure to scriptures like these, which help us think about reality correctly. This is very important. Otherwise, we will live in our own silly world of worries and improper thinking, and we make that our reality. So there is no place for actual reality in our life. We have created our reality through our thought process. Vivekananda was very adamant about this form of thinking, right thinking. He used to say, you are verily what your thoughts have made you. So take care of what you think. Take the whole responsibility on your own shoulders and know that you are the creators of your destiny. You create it through your thought process. Infinite power lies within you. You can do anything and everything. The obstacle is only your thought. At one place he says, call upon the sleeping soul and see how it awakens. Power will come, glory will come, goodness will come, purity will come. All that is excellent will come once the soul is aroused to self-conscious activity. Awakening the inner soul and a properly guided thought process is absolutely required for success in spiritual life, even in ordinary life. If you have a thought process which is berserk and totally out of your grasp, I'm telling you, it will create a jaded sense of reality for you, and you will live in that world. So there are a number of stories told about this, how a proper thought process leads you to a very elevated life and proper understanding of what the universe is about, and a thought process which is conditioned negatively or biased or full of negative emotion, it can simply create, it will generate a hell out of heaven. Even if you are placed in heaven, a mind which is wrongly conditioned will give you a hell of an experience there. And that's the, for today's youngsters, I say this when they complain of negativity and how to come out of it and all that. So I tell them that, you see, you are actually in heaven, but you have made your mind such, due to all sorts of exposures getting into you, without any form of, the lack of any form of training in yoga, you have made yourself such that you are creating a hell out of heaven. Otherwise, a well-developed body and a well-developed mind, that is a really heavenly experience. And how are you missing it out? It's only because the stuff you have put into your mind has become your reality. And you're repeatedly thinking over that again and again, creating the neural pathways, negative neural pathways. And so your energies are flowing like that, giving you a very miserable experience of life. There is a beautiful story in our scriptures which says how your mind is like a kalpataru, of wish-fulfilling tree. I think even Sri Ramakrishna tells this story. A man went into a forest and he was a hunter and he wanted to hunt. But he got tired after some time. He could not find any animal. So he sat down under a tree. So he wanted to rest for some time and then go on. And then he started thinking, oh, this ground is so hard here. I wish it was a little even and it was a little soft. And then suddenly, a kind of bed, a soft bed appeared under his feet. And he thought, what is this? I just thought that something soft should be there. And it's immediately become like that. Then he thought, oh, I wish I had some food. I'm so tired and hungry. And then food suddenly appeared. Then he wanted something to drink. And wine appeared. Because he was sitting under a wish-fulfilling tree, what is called the kalpataru. Then he thought, I wish somebody pressed my feet. I'm so tired. And then somebody came and started pressing his feet. So everything that he's imagining is becoming reality. Then this fellow who had a completely untrained mind suddenly thought, what if a tiger comes? Everything that I'm thinking is coming true. What if a tiger comes here? And a tiger did come and pounced upon him and ate him up. So you see, the tree is your mind. Whether you live with somebody or not, you will always live with your mind. Even beyond this life, The Sukshma Sharir goes with you. You will always live with your mind. So better condition it positively. Make sure your neural pathways are all positive. Your vrittis are all purified and sattvic and noble and elevating. So that you will, even if you are placed in hell, you will have a heaven of an experience. Because happiness and experience is a state of your mind. So you are under the wish-fulfilling tree all the time. And how you think, the problem with our thought process is sometimes it is very negative. We overthink many times. And it is very biased in many ways. It's wrongly conditioned because we didn't pay attention. Many people use their mind like a waste paper basket. You don't want something, well, keep throwing it. You can't, the levels of exposure which we give ourselves and what exactly you ingest through the senses is creating the content of your mind. So when we are so particular about nutrition and what is on our plate and what will go into our physical system, we should also be very particular what will go into our mental system, isn't it? What you take in through your senses is becoming the content of your mind. And what are we taking in through our senses? All that the media has to offer day and night. So take care. Make sure what enters into your system is good and sattvic and noble. Then you will see the content of your mind will be very good, very noble. This is the way to gradually change our mind and bring in positivity into our lives. Every day repeat to yourself, God is for me. And my mind is for me. So nothing in this universe can be against me. Absolutely nothing in this universe can be against me, because my mind is for me and God, of course, is for me. So this kind of positive thinking every day is absolutely essential for you to develop the state of mind where you can transcend this level of mind. If the mind has negative conditioning, it is very, very difficult to pursue a spiritual life. So these are some of the laws of thought which we should know before we proceed to the next verse. Please also remember this one thing, that all great things begin from within yourself. Like the hatching of an egg. It's something which begins from within the egg, isn't it? The very process of life begins from within yourself, from the inner mechanism. So some understanding of it and helping it unfold the way it should, so that human life unfolds to its full potential. This is our responsibility. After coming for this many years on this earth, we should make sure that we have a complete human experience and tap our potential to its fullest. So this will only become possible through positive thinking. Let us correct our thought process, that is why. Now I have just 2-3 more minutes before we go into Q&A. Let's just go into the next verse. 27. Atma avabhasayati eko buddhyadin indriyanyapi deepo ghatadivat swatma jadaiste navabhasyate. This is a very profound verse. The mind, the sense organs, and so on are illumined by Atman alone, as a jar or pot by a lamp. But these material objects cannot illumine their own self. See, this verse actually reminds me of a beautiful verse in Dakshinamurti Stotram, which is again a composition of Shankaracharya. It's the description of the Guru of Lord Shiva, actually, as Dakshinamurti. There he says, a similar description is there. Nana chidra ghatodara sthitamaha deepa prabhabhaswaram jnanam yastadu chakshuradi karana dvara bahi spandate janamiti tameva bhantam anubhati etat samastam jagat tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshinamurtaye. If you place a lamp in a pitcher or in a pot which has a number of holes, won't the light stream out of those holes? A very beautiful lighted lamp is placed in a pitcher with a number of holes. So the light streams out of those holes. So also the light of consciousness, the luminosity of your self streams out through the senses of the enlightened person, of the Guru. It streams out of his mind. His mind and senses are radiant with that light of the Atman, the light of awareness. And it lights up the surroundings. Tameva bhantam anubhati etat samastam jagat means this. It lights up the surroundings. He renders everything radiant by his own radiance. What a beautiful description. This idea is there even in the Upanishads. Tasya bhasa sarvamidam vibhati. By the light of Brahman, everything is lighted. This is the light of supreme awareness. You render everything conscious by this inner light of consciousness ever shining within you. So this is the meaning of this verse. As a lighted lamp, the mind, the senses, and so on are illumined by the Atman alone, as a jar or pot by a lamp. And these objects cannot illumine themselves because I told you this light, its source is the Atman. So they are non-self luminous. But the light of the Atman, the light of awareness, makes your entire equipment, this entire gadget, it makes it conscious. So the more we cultivate this self-knowledge, the more we will be able to handle this equipment wonderfully. At the same time, it will function as it should function in the human experience. It is a lighted equipment, like a lighted lamp. The very purpose of a lamp is to give light. So the very purpose of this system is to express the inner light completely. It is a very beautiful verse. So with this, let us step into the question answer session for this time. As usual, very nice questions are there. The first question is again on Bhakti. She has described a beautiful experience of her mother, and then she asks, could this be another way to self-knowledge, the way of Bhakti? The experience is about Vrindavan. All of you must have heard of Vrindavan, the place where Krishna's, which is famous for Krishna's sports, and where he grew up, and it's associated with so many beautiful memories and emotions. It is actually one of the most vibrant spiritual places on this planet. If you go there and stay there for some time, your entire mind will change. It is so full of devotion, Vrindavan. Vrindavan is very close to where we live here, very close to Delhi. Just 2.5 hour drive. So if you come to our ashram here, definitely we'll take you to Vrindavan, after this COVID, of course. It's a very beautiful experience to just visit Vrindavan. Just 2.5 hour drive. And you stay there for some time, your entire mind will change, your thought process. You don't have to struggle with the mind at all, because the place is so vibrant. This is what is called Sthan Mahatmyam, which means the power of the consecrated space. It will change the thought currents of your mind. It will change your vrittis naturally. And so this path of bhakti which you are speaking of, definitely it is the most powerful thing you can do with your equipment. If you generate real bhakti, it will change all things that need changing in you. Nothing more is required. Devotion to God is the result of supreme intelligence and effort. And this one-pointed devotion, the mind constantly flowing towards the Supreme Being and completely devoted to that state. This is the actual thing to be aimed for. Self-knowledge will come spontaneously as a result of that. Shankaracharya's definition of bhakti was Swaswarupa Anusandhanam Bhaktiriti Abhidiyate. If you try to know your true being, that is bhakti. Even if you follow the path of dual sadhana, duality, you conceive of God outside of you as a person, as a vyakti, as a supreme Godhead, a personality. Even by worshipping the supreme Godhead in that way, you can achieve the same state of self-knowledge. In fact, all of these systems of thought, whether it's Dvaita, Vishishtadvaita, Advaita, all of them encourage bhakti, because that is the only way to transform the mind to come into these levels of knowledge. So devotion either to the personal God or to the impersonal God. But devotion in your system, please work towards generating that, and everything else will follow. If devotion is there, you require very little to come to these levels of knowledge. And if devotion is lacking, just through, this is not intellectual gymnastics, please know this. Vedanta is not intellectual gymnastics at all. That is why logic will not lead you to the experience of it. It will just convince your intellect. But devotion will lead you directly into it. It's the direct path actually. So combine all of these and make devotion your dominant emotion. And naturally you will enter into self-knowledge. No question about that. So the next thing is, before I go to the next question, we don't have too much time. So let me go into the next question. I was wondering if you could explain the process of the mind transcending the mind. You mentioned that there is a process for it in class 6. See, the normal mind works within the parameters of time, space, and causation, isn't it? That's when we call it mind. It is conditioned by time, space, and causation. When do you experience a timeless moment? Tell me, in your own experience, from your own experience, when do you transcend time? There are two instances when you actually transcend time in your everyday life. One is the state of sushupti, and second is the state of meditation. Have you seen this? In the state of deep meditation, you transcend time. In sushupti also you transcend time. There is another state where you transcend time. That is when you are deeply in love. Bhakti. Bhakti helps you transcend time. So there are states in your everyday life where you transcend the limitations of the mind. So transcending mind through mind should not be difficult to understand. The more sadhana you do, the more these states will become your normal natural states. The state of deep devotion, the state of intense peacefulness as you feel in Sushupti, and the state of meditation where you are simply beyond time, fully conscious, yet beyond these parameters. So this is a possibility. It is all sadhana shapika, which means it is all based on sadhana. The more you practice spiritual discipline, the more these things become clear. Then, who is the perceiver of the absence of experience? I slept happily in the state of deep sleep when mind and senses are withdrawn. So please explain this Sakshi Bhav of Atman that is unaffected by modes of mind, Prakriti. See, you can remain over as the witness of your entire mind activity. This can be practiced in sadhana. But Sakshi Bhav, being the Sakshi, cannot be practiced. It just happens at a certain stage in your meditation. You don't practice being the self. You practice being aware of the content of your mind. So you are the witness of the happenings in your mind. As you go on remaining as the witness, at some point you will stall the mind, the thought process. And if you do it yogically, you will awaken the spiritual heart. You will awaken the higher awareness. Then you know you are the Atman. So you don't exactly, although we speak in these words that practicing the Sakshi Bhav, but you can at the most be the witness of your thought process and deepen this practice to a level where you enter into the state of pure being. This is possible. Then, in the state of meditation, is no mind and mindfulness the same? If different, what that practice is aimed at? Mindfulness meditation practice helps in better concentration and focus. Please correct me if I'm wrong. See, your mental field can be described as a sky with clouds. The sky is awareness, the clouds are thoughts. Your normal mental field is like this, sky with clouds. Now, when we talk of mindfulness, it means just one cloud in the sky. So you are in a concentrated focus state. You are mindful of that particular thought. But no mind state means just the sky without thought, without clouds. Now, this no mind state can be generated through mindfulness also. Initially, we are practicing only mindfulness. Even if it is your japa, even if it is your rupa dhyan of some god, some deity whom you adore, it is all making you more and more mindful. Vipassana, mindfulness on physical sensations. All of this is making you more and more focused on one particular thought, one particular cloud. If you remove your identification from that one particular cloud, you will enter the state of no mind. Because then the cloud will collapse. So mindfulness can lead to no mind state. But the no mind state alone is to be aimed at through the practice of mindfulness. Maybe you take that as the initial thing. See, the actual spiritual psychology of spiritual practice is this. Mindfulness is to begin with. It should lead you to the state of no mind, where you are completely aware without thoughts. This is the supreme state. You remember the story of the samurai, which I told you in one of the classes? Two samurai were facing each other, and one was an elder and the other was very much young in years. But he had learned his lessons well, this younger person. And he remembered his teacher's teaching given to him. His teacher had told him, look, my son, when you are fighting with an opponent, if you place your mind on his sword, the mind will be taken up by his sword. If you place your mind on his face, it will be taken up by his face. If you place your mind on his mind, it will be taken up by his mind. And if you place your mind on your sword, it will be taken up by your sword. If you place it on your emotion in your mind, it will be taken up by that emotion. So, generate the state of no mind, no thoughts. And that very instrument that you're calling mind will perfectly reflect what is happening in his mind, so that you will be able to foresee his every move, his every action you can anticipate, and that is how you will win the fight. So this no mind state, all Zen masters, martial arts experts, all of them recommended this state. And of course, in spiritual life, spiritual practitioners, they just covet this state for the simple reason it holds the key to the state of complete awareness. It's a really magical state to attain, where you will just know without the thought process, where you are complete being, and you will know the silliness of your individuality, where you are fullness and yet completely empty. This is the no mind state. Then let's go to the last question. The question is basically, it's a long question, but I'll just shorten it for you. Is ignorance real? Because the ignorance appears to be real, but I don't know if body, mind, intellect, none of this is real. How can my ignorance alone be real? According to Vedanta, actually, ignorance also is not real. Ya ma sa maya. That which is not there is appearing as maya. Maya generates appearances. It is itself an appearance in your consciousness. So it is not given absolute existence, isn't it? Under the spell of ignorance, delusion, Maya works her magic. You can get out of that state. That's why she may be Anadi, she is not Anant. She may be beginningless. You may be ignorant. Your ignorance may be beginningless. But it can end at any moment of time. Once knowledge comes in, ignorance ends. So Maya is not absolute. So your ignorance is never absolute. Don't give it that status at all. It can be removed completely. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, just bring light into a room which was dark for 1,000 years. All the darkness is dispelled in 1 second. You just brought in a lamp and the darkness of 1,000 years is dispelled. So also, Maya, ignorance is simply dispelled when you bring the light of awareness to bear upon your system. What never was will never remain. Whatever was will ever remain. This is what Vedanta brings you to. So I think time is up. Let's end our session here with a prayer. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukha Bhaga Bhavet, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.